Oregon Trail, 1867. The land stretched endless and unforgiving, a canvas painted with harsh browns and muted greens under a vast blue sky. Here, where nature's beauty masked its cruelty, 24-year-old Asher Collins believed one truth above all others. The frontier was no place for tender hearts. Love was a luxury afforded to those back east, those who slept in beds instead of bedrolls, those whose hands weren't calloused by rope and whose eyes didn't constantly scan the horizon for danger. The wagon train had left Independence, Missouri 8 weeks prior, a snaking line of canvas-covered hopes and dreams heading west. Asher rode alongside his hired protection, his six-shooter at his hip more companion than tool. His youth was betrayed only by the occasional boyish smile that would flash across his face when he thought no one was looking. Otherwise, the slight stubble on his square jaw and the weathered look in his blue eyes spoke of years lived hard and fast. Collins called out the wagon master, a gruff man named Harmon. "Ride ahead and scout the pass. Make sure we ain't heading into trouble." Asher nodded, adjusting his worn leather hat before spurring his horse forward. This was his value. Eyes sharp, trigger finger ready. Not in soft words or tender touches. Not in building something that could be taken away. 3 years as a trail guide had taught him that attachment was the surest path to heartbreak. He'd seen too many graves dug along this trail. Too many widows created by cholera, Indians, accidents, or the simple cruelty of nature. Better to remain apart, useful but untethered. His parents' farm in Tennessee felt like another lifetime ago, burned during the war, leaving him with nothing but a horse and the skills to stay alive. That was enough. Had to be enough. As his horse crested the hill, Asher saw the pass stretching before him, and something else. A wagon, separated from another train perhaps, its wheel broken and listing to one side like a wounded animal. He approached cautiously, hand resting on his revolver. "Hello, the wagon," he called out, stopping 30 yards away. A young woman emerged, her hair the color of summer wheat falling in waves around a face that made Asher's breath catch. 20 years old at most, with eyes the clear green of spring leaves and a determination in her stance that belied her delicate features. Her blue calico dress was dusty but well kept, a sign of dignity maintained against the trail's best efforts. "Thank heavens," she said, relief evident in her voice. "Are you with a train?" Our group continued on, said they'd send help back, but that was yesterday morning. "Miss?" Asher remained in his saddle, maintaining distance both physical and emotional. "Sophia Kent," she replied, straightening her shoulders. "My father's inside with fever. We couldn't keep up, and they couldn't wait." The slight quiver in her voice revealed the fear she was trying to hide. Asher felt something stir in his chest, an unwelcome feeling he quickly suppressed. "There's a train about 2 hours behind me. I'm their scout. We can get your wheel fixed," but he hesitated, not wanting to voice the obvious truth that her father's fever might mean death was already visiting this wagon. "He'll recover," Sophia said firmly, as if daring fate to contradict her. "He just needs rest and medicine. I've been caring for him alone since Mother passed last year." The wagon train arrived by mid-afternoon. Asher found himself checking on the Kent wagon more often than necessary, while men worked to replace the broken wheel. Inside, Jacob Kent lay sweating through his fever, his daughter cooling his forehead with water from their dwindling supply. "We've got medicine," Asher said, holding out a small bottle the wagon train's doctor had provided. "Not much, but it might help." Sophia's fingers brushed his as she took the bottle, and Asher withdrew his hand as if burned. The simple human contact felt foreign, dangerous even. "Thank you," she said, her green eyes holding his for a moment too long. "For not leaving us behind." "Just doing my job," he replied curtly, turning to leave. But as he stepped away, Jacob Kent's raspy voice stopped him. "Young man," the older man called, his voice weak but urgent. "Promise me. Promise you'll see my daughter safely to Oregon if I don't make it." "Father, don't talk that way," Sophia protested. But Asher saw the reality in the old man's eyes, the same look he'd seen too many times before. Death was hovering, patient but persistent. "I promise," Asher found himself saying, words escaping before he could catch them. Promises were dangerous things on the frontier. They bound you to outcomes you couldn't control. Yet he'd made one anyway, to a dying man and his beautiful daughter. a promise that would challenge everything he believed about survival on the frontier. 3 days later, they buried Jacob Kent beneath an oak tree with a view of the mountains. Sophia stood dry-eyed beside the grave, her grief too vast for tears. The wagon train couldn't delay long. The seasons waited for no one, and winter in the mountains meant death. Miss Kent, Asher approached after the brief service. The wagon master says you're welcome to continue with us. I have no choice, she replied, voice hollow. Father sold everything for this journey. Our land in Oregon is all I have left. That evening, Asher found her sitting alone by her wagon, staring into a small fire. Without speaking, he added wood to the flames, then sat across from her, the firelight casting shadows across their faces. You don't have to watch over me, Sophia said finally. I'm not your responsibility. I made a promise. To a dead man. Still counts, Asher replied, meeting her gaze. Something shifted between them then, an acknowledgement that they were now bound by more than circumstance. Sophia Kent represented everything Asher avoided: vulnerability, attachment, the possibility of loss. Yet here he was, tied to her safety by a deathbed vow. The wagon train continued west, facing the relentless challenges of the trail. Rivers needed crossing, mountains loomed ahead, and rumors of hostile tribes kept everyone alert. Sophia drove her wagon alone now, her delicate hands developing blisters and then calluses. Asher found himself riding alongside her more often than not, telling himself it was only to honor his promise. You never mention family, Sophia observed one afternoon as their wagons navigated a particularly rocky stretch. Is there no one waiting for you somewhere? Asher kept his eyes on the trail ahead. Lost them in the war. Farm too. I'm sorry, she said simply. Don't be. Taught me an important lesson. What's that? He glanced at her, noting how the sun brought gold highlights to her hair. That nothing lasts out here. Better not to get attached to what you'll eventually lose. Sophia considered this, her hands steady on the reins. That sounds like a lonely way to live, Mr. Collins. It's a safe way to live. Safe isn't the same as living, she replied quietly. The words haunted him that night as he sat his watch, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the circle of wagons. Sophia's question had struck deeper than he cared to admit. Was he living or merely surviving? The distinction had never seemed important before. Their first true crisis came at the Snake River crossing. Summer rains had swollen the waters, making the ford treacherous. 3 wagons across, Sophia's wagon hit a deep spot, the current threatening to overturn it. Without hesitation, Asher spurred his horse into the water, reaching her as the wagon began to tilt. Jump, he shouted over the roar of the water. Sophia hesitated only a moment before leaping from the wagon seat. Asher caught her, pulling her onto his horse as the current swept them downstream. They fought their way to the shore, both soaking and breathless. On the riverbank, Sophia clung to him, her body trembling against his. Asher found himself holding her tight, his heart racing from more than just exertion. The wagon, she gasped, looking back at the river where her worldly possessions were being swept away. To hell with the wagon, Asher said fiercely. You're alive. The wagon was recovered later, damaged but salvageable. That night, as the camp settled, Asher found Sophia by the fire, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, staring into the flames. Thank you, she said as he sat beside her, for saving my life. Anyone would have done the same. No, she shook her head. Not anyone. You risked your life for mine. I made a promise, he replied, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. Sophia's gaze was too perceptive, seeing through the excuse. Is that the only reason? Asher found himself unable to maintain the distance he'd so carefully cultivated. No, he admitted quietly. It's not just the promise. That night marked a shift between them. As the wagon train pushed on through the summer heat, Asher found himself drawn to Sophia's quiet strength. She never complained, despite the hardships. Instead, she found small beauties in the journey, a field of wildflowers, the majesty of distant mountains, a perfect sunset painting the prairie gold. How do you do it? He asked one evening as they sat by her campfire, the rest of the train settling in for the night. Do what? Find joy in this place. After everything you've lost. Sophia considered the question, her profile golden in the firelight. I suppose I believe that life isn't measured by what's taken from us, but by what we do with what remains. And what remains for you? Asher asked, suddenly needing to know. Hope, she said simply. The land waiting for us in Oregon. The chance to build something new. She paused, meeting his eyes. And people who still care whether I live or die. The implication hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. Against his every intention, Asher Collins had come to care deeply for Sophia Kent. The realization terrified him. The Blue Mountains loomed ahead, the final major obstacle before Oregon's Willamette Valley. As the train prepared for the difficult crossing, tension within the group mounted. Food supplies were dwindling, oxen growing thin, and the weather turning unpredictable as autumn approached. It was during a scouting mission that Asher discovered the tracks, at least 6 horses, following the wagon train at a distance. Bandits, most likely, waiting for the vulnerable moment the train would be stretched thin in the mountain passes. We need to change course, he told the wagon master upon returning. There's trouble following us. There's no other way through the mountains this late in the season, Harmon replied grimly. We'd lose weeks we don't have. Winter's coming. The news spread through the train, fear following in its wake. That evening, Asher told Sophia of the danger as they sat beside her fire. I want you to take this, he said, offering her a small revolver. Keep it close. Sophia took the weapon, its weight strange in her slender hands. Do you really think it will come to that? I hope not. But hoping isn't the same as preparing. He showed her how to load and fire it, her quick understanding belying her gentle appearance. I won't leave you unprotected, he promised. I know, she replied softly. You've proven that. Their fingers touched as she handed back the gun, and this time, Asher didn't pull away. Instead, he found himself drawing closer, his hand reaching up to touch her cheek. The warmth of her skin beneath his calloused fingers felt like a revelation. Sophia, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion he'd kept buried for too long. Yes. Her green eyes held his, unafraid. I'm breaking all my own rules, he admitted. Good. She replied simply, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home after years of wandering. That night changed everything. As they continued their journey into the mountains, Asher found himself planning beyond the trails and for the first time since the war. Sophia spoke of her land claim in Oregon's fertile valley, painting pictures with words of the home she hoped to build. It's enough land for a good-sized farm, she said one evening as they walked alongside her wagon. Father had it all planned. Crops in the valley, cattle on the hillsides. Sounds like a lot of work for one person, Asher observed carefully. Sophia gave him a sidelong glance. I never said I planned to work it alone. Hope bloomed in Asher's chest, a dangerous, wonderful feeling he denied himself for years. But as quickly as it came, doubt followed. What did he have to offer her? A saddle, a gun, and years of running from attachment. I'm not much of a farmer, he said finally. But you could learn, she replied, her voice gentle but firm. If you wanted to. If he wanted to. The choice lay before him. Continue his solitary existence or risk everything on a future with Sophia. Before he could answer, shouts erupted from the front of the train. The bandits had made their move, attacking the lead wagons as they navigated a narrow pass. Gunshots echoed through the mountains as Asher raced toward the sound, shouting for Sophia to stay back and keep down. Chaos reigned as 6 armed men on horseback weaved between the wagons, firing shots and creating panic. Asher joined the defense, his revolver finding its mark twice. In the confusion, he lost sight of Sophia's wagon, fear gripping him as he fought his way back through the train. When he found her wagon, it was empty. Cold dread washed over him until he heard a gunshot from behind a nearby boulder. There stood Sophia, his small revolver in her hand, facing down a bandit who clutched his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. Next one goes in your heart, she was saying, her voice steady despite the slight tremble of the gun in her hand. Asher moved silently behind the wounded man, bringing the butt of his revolver down hard. As the bandit crumpled, Sophia's composure finally broke, the gun lowering as she exhaled sharply. Are you hurt? Asher asked urgently, reaching her in 3 long strides. She shook her head, falling into his arms. I thought they might have killed you. Takes more than that, he replied, holding her tight. You saved yourself. I had a good teacher, she murmured against his chest. The attack was repelled, with 2 bandits dead and the others fleeing into the mountains. The wagon train suffered 1 death and 3 wounded, but pushed on immediately, knowing lingering would invite another attack. That night, as the heightened watch kept guard, Asher made his decision. The day's violence had clarified everything, not by reinforcing his belief that attachment brought pain, but by revealing the opposite truth. In a world where death could come at any moment, love wasn't a luxury. It was essential. "I want to stay," he told Sophia as they sat close together by her fire. "In Oregon. With you." Her eyes widened. "Are you certain? Just yesterday you spoke of riding south for the winter." "That was yesterday," he said simply. "Before I almost lost you. Before I realized that being safe isn't worth much if you're alone." The remainder of the journey through the mountains tested them all. Early snow fell, making the trails treacherous. Food grew scarcer, and the cold seeped into bones already weary from months of travel. But Asher found himself facing each challenge with newfound purpose. Each obstacle overcome brought them closer to Oregon, closer to a future he now allowed himself to imagine. It was during the final descent from the mountains that disaster struck again. A wheel broke on Sophia's wagon while navigating a steep, narrow trail. The wagon slipped, tipping dangerously toward a ravine. Asher leaped to secure it with rope, but the weight was too much. "Jump clear," he shouted to Sophia, who was trying to calm the panicked oxen. She leaped just as the wagon broke free, tumbling down the slope in a shower of splintering wood and scattered possessions. Everything she had left in the world, gone in an instant. Sophia stood at the edge of the trail, staring down at the wreckage below. When she turned to Asher, he expected tears, despair, perhaps even blame. Instead, her eyes held a steady resolve that humbled him. "It's just things," she said quietly. "Everything you had." He reminded her, moving to her side. "Not everything." She took his hand. "I still have what matters most." In that moment, on that mountainside with disaster at their feet, Asher Collins finally understood what Sophia had been teaching him all along. The frontier didn't make love impossible, it made it essential. Survival alone was empty. It was connection that gave life meaning, even when, especially when, everything else was stripped away. 2 weeks later, they reached Oregon's Willamette Valley, a paradise of green after months of harsh terrain. With the wagon gone, Sophia rode double with Asher, her arms around his waist, a constant reminder of the choice he'd made. Her land claim lay near the town of Salem, 160 acres of fertile valley bordered by gentle, forested hills. When they crested the final rise and the property spread before them, Asher felt a sense of rightness he hadn't known since before the war. "It's beautiful," he said, helping Sophia down from the horse. "It needs work," she replied practically. "A house, barn, fencing. We'll build it," Asher said, the "we" feeling natural on his tongue now. Together, with winter approaching, they faced immediate challenges. The first snow fell as they were still constructing a basic cabin, with help from neighbors who welcomed the young couple with frontier generosity. Inside their half-finished home, heated by a stone fireplace, Asher took Sophia's hands in his one evening. "This isn't what I planned," he admitted. "When I took this job, I thought I'd be in California by winter." "Are you disappointed?" she asked, searching his face. "No," he said firmly. "For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band he'd traded his pocket watch to purchase in town. "I know we don't have much yet. The house isn't finished, the land's not planted, and winter's coming. But I don't want to wait for perfect circumstances." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as he continued, his voice growing steady with each word. "I spent years believing the frontier was no place for love. That attachment only meant greater pain when loss came. But you showed me I was wrong." He took a deep breath. "Sophia Kent, will you marry me? Build this life with me, whatever comes." "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes." They were married by a circuit preacher the following Sunday, in the small church in Salem. As Asher slipped the gold band onto Sophia's finger, he marveled at the journey that had brought him here. Not just the physical miles from Independence to Oregon, but the distance his heart had traveled. Spring arrived with explosive green, the valley coming alive around their completed cabin. The land Sophia had inherited was everything her father had promised: rich soil for crops, gentle slopes for future orchards, and meadows where Asher had already begun to raise a small herd of cattle. "What do you think?" Sophia asked one evening as they stood on their porch, watching the sunset paint the valley gold. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, their child growing within. Asher wrapped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. I think your father would be proud. Of the land. Of you. And us, she added. He would have liked you, I think. I made good on my promise to him, Asher said, though I never expected keeping it would change everything. As dusk settled over their land, Asher Collins looked at the home they'd built, not just the cabin and fields, but the life they'd created together. The frontier hadn't changed. It was still dangerous, unpredictable, capable of taking everything in an instant. But he had changed. He had learned that the very uncertainty that had once made him avoid attachment now made love all the more precious. No regrets? Sophia asked, reading his thoughtful expression. Asher smiled, thinking of the lonely man who had once believed safety lay in isolation. None, he replied, his voice certain. This is what was missing. Not just a place to be, but a place to belong. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, they stood together on the porch of the home they'd built, the future stretching before them like the vast Oregon sky, boundless and full of promise.